Hello YouTube. I wanted to make this video to explain my thoughts lately. So it started off in February. I had been working as an engineer for many years, let's say 7 years. I'd show up early to work every day, which I considered early. I had to be there for 7. But before I started working, I started having a pastime of social dancing, salsa, Latin dancing, which would keep me out until 10 or 11 most evenings. And I wouldn't be drinking, but I'd be having a lot of fun with friends and spending a lot of energy. I gym almost every day just because I enjoy it. I get a lot of endorphins from the gym. It's a very satisfying thing. And I'm not a morning person. So going back to me starting early in the morning, that was always against my natural mindset or personal interests, just the way I'm built or the way I grew up and decided to be. And I am not a morning person when it comes to the gym. I would never make myself wake up early. I don't want the gym to be anything negative. I get a lot of personal happiness from going to the gym. So I decide to do it when my body's ready and eager. So I do it after work. So I'd finish work at 5, start at 7. So that's 10-hour days, which isn't crazy, but I like flexibility. I am an existentialist at its finest. So when I don't want to do something, I start to question why I should have to do it when I feel like I'm putting enough effort and should be valued properly to be compensated or treated properly. That's been a little bit of a issue living in North America, especially as an engineer and in a construction management field. Most of the people that work in that area are people that really take their jobs seriously or feel as though the only way to get promoted or be given opportunity is to sacrifice their time, their efforts, and basically suck up to everyone, which is fine. If that's something that you actually enjoy, if that's something that feels natural to you, if that's something that could provide you the lifestyle that you're seeking and you aren't concerned that your health will ever be an issue, that's perfect. That's natural. That makes complete sense. Obviously, it will suck if you get to a point where you didn't prepare and your life gives you a curveball, but at the same time, it's hard to always be thinking about those things, especially when they're not touching your mind too often. It's only during a hardship or serious impact that might cause you to change that lifestyle, which maybe was even me. Like, I was young, I was very in love, and I got out of that relationship just when I finished school. I started Latin dancing, like I said, as a pastime because I'm an engineer and a civil engineer. So a lot of the construction guys like going drinking beers and stuff like that and talking about very simple things. Small talk is okay once a month or once every 2 weeks, but I'm not into small talk for long-term purposes or as an activity that I would actually want to put myself putting my energy towards outside of work when I'm already tired from being in that environment at work most of the day. I don't want to continue with the same kind of personality environment around me. So I start realizing more about myself. I'm, like I said, not a morning person. I work out after work. So I'd work out from, let's say, 5 to 6. I'd make it pleasurable. I wouldn't have any real like setting of what I have to do. I walk in, I look at machines and I say, I'm going to do them. Consistency for me is what led to me having the body that I was very comfortable and proud to have. I have an athletic build and I don't want to be someone of an extra 20 pounds on my body. I don't want to put my joints through that issue. And I feel I look natural and as though I could perform tremendous activities with the body that I have at the moment. So I'm comfortable with that. So the gym has been, for me, has been a very positive thing. It's a meditative thing because I don't have any setting. I don't have any plan. I go very in a flow state and my body reacts very quickly. A lot of blood flow, a lot of, I guess, endorphin chemistry flowing through my veins and giving a lot of pleasure to my mind. And afterwards, I feel like I accomplished a short-term goal. So dancing was the same thing for me. As an engineer, I started learning merengue, and merengue is kind of like very hand and arm heavy combination, which is kind of like a puzzle to me. So I'd walk in and we'd be like starting off with our hands holding together, and we'd do some turns and stuff, and all of a sudden my hand would let go and come down here, wrap her around, and then come here and then wrap her around. So to the eye, you'd be watching it and you'd say, oh, that's interesting and looks doable, and you try it and you'd start locking the hands because you wouldn't see when I let go and grab again. It would be quicker than the eye can really pick up with all the other movements going on. So to me, it was short-term gain oriented, which is the same as the gym for me. Walk in with a small little goal, and you walk out accomplished, and your brain's just fireworking afterwards, as though you achieved something that day over and over again. Never felt old. And if the gym does get old, I give myself a few days off. Not a big deal. So yeah, it all leads to February of this year, where I live in Canada, so winter blues is a thing. So maybe a collection of lack of sunlight, not enough vitamin D, just natural chemistry in my brain not being proper. I just kind of got very existential all of a sudden. I knew my worth. I was around people that were toxic, and I didn't want to be around them anymore. So I started calling in sick all the time, not putting much effort, putting the onus on them all the time, saying, well, you should be doing things too. It's not my responsibility. Just putting a lot of pushback and trying to push them to a point where they would say, what's wrong? Or perhaps we don't need you anymore or something like that. And I felt like I was never being rude about it, even though I was being treated improperly at times. I never responded rudely because what's the point? Like that just gives ammunition to other people. A lot of people don't know how to respond when you actually are kind to them in a difficult situation. It really, they want you to be flustered. They want you to react because that's what they're used to, and they have all the tool set to maneuver in those situations. But when you respond politely and not really minding if you have the last word, giving them whatever they're looking for, they get actually extremely confused, or they just give up very quickly. They get tired. It's like a boxing match when I know these moves that they've never even thought about, and their brain just gives up immediately. So I get to this point where I realize that I'm not interested in the work anymore, and I don't want to see the people, although I've dealt with them properly and they're leaving me alone. I actually created a big barrier. I was very honest with my directors, my higher up management, and said, well, deal with it, because the people that I work directly with are not treating me properly, and I'm not happy here. I confronted the issue very properly many times, and then it just got to a point where I was no longer wanting to be there. It wasn't really that there were lingering things that I couldn't deal with, because I never have an issue with dealing with things that bother me. I will bring them up to my superiors in a healthy manner and in a way that I want to see improvement, or that I think that there is area to be worked on, and that I'm willing to work with them and acknowledge issues if there are any on their side, give them time to speak of their constructive criticism as well. So that was handled very positively in my mind. But I got to a point where I just didn't really want to work anymore. And I didn't think that that was appropriate to give myself a bad name when it came to my actual work production or my interests of working. I didn't want to be known as a lazy person or someone that couldn't take a job seriously, because that would impact my resume and make me go backwards in life, which to me, on the path of mindfulness, or point where I want to have more time to myself, the last thing I want to do is make it harder for me to find a quality job in the future. I want to be someone who is attractive to employers, so that I can look for a place that does have a good work-life balance and culture. So I was cognizant of being careful with all of the steps that I would take. So I approached my higher manager and let them know that things seemed to be slowing down in the project, and that I felt as though if it were the case that they were looking to lay off somebody, I would be interested in being that person if they were at all considering that in the near future. And then a week later, they came back and said, actually, we were thinking about that for the last few months of how we could deal with this due to the fact that there was less work coming in at the moment. And because you're volunteering, we'd love to work with you and give you a severance and blah, 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 blah. So everything worked out. I had an issue. I thought about it. I approached it, and I feel like it was dealt with in almost the best manner it could have. Now in Canada, we have EI. So the reason why I was comfortable with being laid off is because I had a lot of savings from working for, let's say, 7 years. And I own my own property, and I rent out rooms, and I also rent out an apartment on the side. So that pays for itself. My cars are paid for. I don't have any loans or anything. So I was going to get EI for the first time in my life, which is about $2,000 after taxes a month, which is plenty for someone who's not working, who's saved, and who just wants some time to think. So that's what I wanted, time to think, and I got it. And then a week later, although COVID had been it was talked about, and it seemed like it was something that was real and all this, but I went through SARS many years ago, and it was something that didn't really grab as much. It wasn't as contagious, and it wasn't as severe by any means, it seems, as COVID. And the response happened immediately, and everyone just shut everything down a week later. So this was beyond beautiful. Beyond beautiful. However, I was in an area that is across a bridge, and they were talking about that they were going to close the bridges for COVID. So I decided to rent out my place completely and then do a sublet across the other side of the bridge where it's much more beautiful, in my opinion, nature-wise. I was right beside a river that has like beautiful waterfalls and rapids, and then just like a lot of places to meditate, and always a reason to go out in the morning and venture, and lots of people living around me so I could meet them. It was a very good decision for 5 months from May until September. So I moved there in May, and by this time COVID's actually happened over March and April, where people got quiet, there was less going around, but I still had a social circle, so I was still speaking with people and stuff, but doing a lot of introspection, and a lot of placing a very good amount of time, especially with YouTube. YouTube learns an individual very quickly, and I was basically going through podcasts, getting exposed to thoughts that I hadn't ever contemplated. I was into quantum physics beforehand, and quantum philosophy, and then I was into existential philosophy and Stoicism, and starting to think about what reincarnation and theology, history. I was into anthropology, knew about basically the entire history of humanity. I listened to the audiobook of the Bible beforehand. I grew up Roman Catholic. I spoke to friends about their religions. Basically just always consuming a certain amount of knowledge to give myself my own interpretation of things. Because I grew up hearing things and then finding out later that they were actually inaccurate. And that's where I started at about 20 investigating myself, and that's when the internet became very popular. So I was able to actually like double check facts and find out the real riddle of the things, or the real background of things that people take for granted, and just make assumptions and let their assumptions be what they believe is the truth. And that's fine, but at the same time, I'm just someone who's more curious, and it blows my mind when I find out how things actually work. So I basically am getting to this point where, coming across podcasts like Lex Friedman's, which is the artificial intelligence podcast, where he's interviewing tremendous people to do with consciousness and evolution, thought, biology, philosophy, mortality, poetry, pretty much everything that an intellectual who is curious about what life is about, and what the sciences have achieved, and where we're going in the future, and what it means to be human, and what it means not to be human, perhaps, and what the afterlife might be about, and the acceptance of all those things and all that consciousness throughout life, and what it can stream to, and what it can create when it comes to depression or anxieties. So that was very useful. Tim Ferriss, also very useful with his Tools of Titans book and podcasts with tremendous people that he interviews. Neil deGrasse Tyson, who basically exposes science in, like I said, kind of like if you were to take the allegory of the cave by Plato, the average person would just talk about it as though you were the prisoner looking at the wall with the shadows moving. But Neil deGrasse Tyson always likes to tell you, oh, there's puppets behind you and there's a candlelight. That's why you see the shadows. And then your mind just blows. And then he might actually tell you, and also you're in a cave. By the way, that light in the far corner, there's an outside out there too. So Neil deGrasse Tyson is very interesting that way. He always likes to give you more information than what you would typically see or take for granted. So taking for granted, that's a really important thing, because now that I've come across the concept of unitivity, which is the 10th and 9th level of ego development. So ego development is basically something that actualize.org on YouTube has been talking about for the last few weeks. He started off with part 1, which was the basic personality types or ego levels that you would see among people that react very quickly, that have a lot of anger or a lot of connection to their lives. They're very, very human. They're very incapable of thinking of the concept of there being something beyond what your brain naturally calculates for you and provides to you. And that's fine. Like, if my brain was naturally like that, which it was, I had a deaf ear for many, many years. If I would speak to my 20-year-old self and tell these things, I might listen. I could see myself, who I knew back then, to listen. But at the same time, many people have a deaf ear, and I could have as well, especially if it wasn't me telling my 20-year-old self. It was just some random person that didn't do a good job explaining it, or made it seem as though they were, when they, like those people that look at you with those kind of absent-minded eyes. You know what I'm trying to say, I think. So it would have had to be somebody who's very convincing and very altogether in one place as they say these things, so that I could actually appreciate their thought pattern and give some kind of appreciation for their intellect or wisdom that they were trying to instill onto me. So I basically get to the point in May and June where I am starting to get very close to a higher level of belief. I'm starting to look at the world. I saw a movie a long time ago called What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, and his wife commits suicide after her husband, who's Robin Williams, and her children pass away. She doesn't commit suicide immediately, but she creates a lot of depression. She becomes very sad, and the whole movie is basically Robin Williams looking for her. In the first, he's looking for her while he's dead, and then he starts looking for her after he finds out she kills herself. But when he finds out he kills herself, he gets very worried, and he starts following her. The movie kind of leads you to where she's at before he finds her, and she basically puts herself in a purgatoric hell. And to me, that's always been an issue, because when you dream, a dream to me is the only other form of existence that I know of. I know what it's like to wake up each morning and be back in this reality consistently for some weird reason. It's bizarre to say the least, but it happens. We take that for granted a lot, I think, and maybe one day I won't, and I'll wake up and they'll be like, surprise, you finally surpassed level 1. Now we're going to put you on level 2. Or maybe that happens when you die. Either or. But yeah, so you fall asleep each night, and you get into this subconscious reality that's not at all lucid, to me anyways. I don't have lucid dreams. I've never had a lucid dream. I'm an observer in my dreams. I go through these thoughts, and sometimes they trouble me. Sometimes I wake up and I'm confused, or realize my heart's racing, let's say. This is rare, but it's happened throughout my life. Especially now, it's much less rare. But I wake up many times from dreams and realize, especially recently, my dreams are very educational lately. At least I interpret them as educational afterwards. I think my dreams are very much so leading me to ego dissolution and growth, because I reflect on them and say, oh my God, like, why would you be dreaming about this? Is this something, an activity that you shouldn't be doing? Is this an action that is causing you more anxiety? Is this troubling? And there is a Zen koan, which I consider to be the paramount of my enlightenment. So I'll tell you now. So there's this monk. Let's say the monk is me. And he is someone who starts speaking to people and telling them that he's seeking enlightenment, but he needs assistance from someone. I haven't done this, but let's hypothetically say that was me. And his community, listening to him, says, well, there's this oracle, there's this wise man who gives wise sayings and wise advice that lives at a temple far away. You should go see him. So he says, of course, excellent idea. Let me venture. So he ventures long to go meet this wise oracle. And when he gets to the temple, he opens and sees the wise man, luckily there. And he asks the wise man, please, wise man, I've heard that you can see aura and give wisdom. Now that you see me, please tell me what you see. Please let me know if there's anything you can give me as guidance. The wise man looks at him and he says, have you eaten your breakfast? And the monk responds, casually, I guess, yes. Okay. Don't know why he wants to know that, but yes. And the wise man looks at him seriously. He says, then wash your dishes. And the monk is immediately enlightened. So to me, the monk is someone who is looking for a purpose to life that doesn't necessarily mean to be human. He wants a purpose for his soul. He doesn't care about this particular identity that he is at the moment. He wants to know what his soul is doing here, and if there's anything that anyone can help him with to get his soul to a non-scarring reality. When I say scarring, I mean like when you fall asleep, if you have nightmares or if you have problems meditating, chances are if you were to pass with that same mindset, never getting to a point of, let's say, level 9 or 10 of ego development, what's to say that if you have any control over your creation of what your afterlife is, if you all of a sudden, instead of a dream being non-lucid, an afterlife is like a lucid dream, then chances are, just like that movie did with Robin Williams, What Dreams May Come, when his wife kills himself, she creates her own purgatoric hell. And I can't imagine, by speaking to as many people as I have about these things, that the average person, or let's say high majority, would not create their own hell if they had any control of the subconscious reality that they create after they pass. If they have not worked on themselves at all, or started to tame their monkey mind, or even thought about consciousness, if they just went autopilot and were human for an entire lifetime, the easy route, which is fine. I don't think it's easy for many people to stop those breaks. But if they don't, and they have all these things, oh, why does my child not talk to me? Oh, why does my spouse hate me? Why do I not feel like I did good at work? Why do I feel like I didn't achieve things in life? Why do I feel like people talk about me poorly when they do mention me? Why am I so concerned about everything that is due to this identity? An existential philosopher would say, you didn't choose what you'd look like. You didn't choose where you'd be born. You didn't choose what family or where you'd be throughout your life. But yet, you take complete judgment from others. You say, oh, your consciousness was put into that body. And poor you. You basically were the unlucky one. You got the short end of the stick. Ha ha ha. But a wise person would say, well, this is transient. This is temporary. I'm learning through this. You ever heard about like difficult lives can cause a lot of character growth? A lot of culture can be brought into their lives due to the fact they become more introverted, perhaps, or maybe seek therapy through art, and that causes them to have a lot of interesting characteristics to follow, and it's a beautiful thing, really. So what I'm trying to get at is now we're at a point where the wise man has said to the monk, have you eaten your breakfast? And what he's really trying to say to the monk here is he's saying, imagine your life as a journey. Imagine a day is comparable to a lifetime's duration. Well, you have a day when you eat the breakfast in the morning, perhaps a healthy breakfast, a sufficient breakfast, and that should be enough to get you through your day. So very well. If I eat a breakfast in the morning, I could probably eat nothing else throughout the day and still be very healthy and filling. Now, what he's trying to say is, have you eaten your breakfast? So if you've eaten your breakfast, which he picked breakfast, he didn't say supper on purpose. He said breakfast. So that's the beginning of your stage of your journey, right? And that is when you basically need to really focus on the fact that you let's say, okay, so you eat your breakfast in the morning and you purposely eat that amount, or you realize at a certain point that you've eaten enough so that you could get through your day. And if you want to think about that, all the consumption of your life, your bucket list, I would compare the breakfast to a bucket list as a metaphor. So this would be like you coming to your midlife crisis or your existential crisis and saying to yourself, have I consumed enough in life? Have I enjoyed being human enough? Do I still have a half glass full? And the wise man saying to the monk, he's saying, with all of your consumption thus far, your breakfast that you've eaten, is your glass still half full? Have you eaten your breakfast? And the monk replies very quickly, not knowing what he's answering to. He says, yes. And then the wise man says, well, if so, if your glass is not half full, God bless you. Good, you've eaten enough for your journey. So, you've come here for wisdom? Let me give it to you. Wash your dishes. Cleanse your soul. Stop consuming. You can still exist, be an observer, consume as much as you want, but don't have to. And do not feel required to. And put that previous energy that you had of consumption to something that will treat your soul, cleanse your soul, relieve yourself of the duty of being human. And this is where I get to something that I wrote recently. So I'm going to explain it to you now.